Up is actually very similar to Star Wars. It has a close relation, mainly with episodes 4 through 6, which are A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. The characters we'll be analyzing from Up are Russell, Carl Fredricksen, Charles Mutz, Doug, Kevin, the dogs, Mutz's blimp, Mr. Fredricksen's house, and that's it for Up.
The characters from Star Wars will be Luke Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Han Solo, Chewbacca, Darth Vader, Emperor Palpatine, Anakin Skywalker, Yoda, the Clone Troopers, the Millennium Falcon, and the Death Star.
Okay, so at the beginning of Up, we have young Mr. Ferguson and Ellie representing Padme and Anakin. So Fredricksen is Padme and Ellie is Anakin. And basically during the end of this introduction, Ellie dies, and this kind of figuratively kills Mr. Fredricksen on the inside, just like Anakin did to Padme, except he pretty much literally killed her.
At first, Mr. Muntz, Charles Muntz, is like Yoda because Ellie and Mr. Fredricksen, as kids, look up to him as their guide to adventure. They watch his adventures closely as a kid. They both do games based off like his blimp. That's where they first meet in, ironically, a house that was abandoned that Ellie used as a blimp for her adventures, imaginary and whatnot, while he was using a balloon.
In the movie, we come across Russell, who represents Luke in the fact that Mr. Fredricksen, who is basically Obi-Wan, coaches him along, kind of helps him and everything. And Russell is pretty much just along for the ride. After that, later in the movie, Russell ends up falling off the blimp, and Mr. Fredricksen, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, or not Obi-Wan Kenobi, like Han Solo, has to fly in with the Millennium Falcon, which is his house, and rescue Russell / Luke from falling to his death.
And the dogs in the movie are like the stormtroopers in Star Wars because they have a very bad aim and have trouble getting the job that they're tasked done. Such as the stormtroopers in the movie, the dogs, when they're on the ground, only happen to get one lucky shot, which is when they take out Snipe's leg by biting it. They've tried to bite many other things during the movie, and they missed almost every time to prove to be non-lethal. And then, at one point, the dogs are in planes, firing at the balloons on the house, trying to knock it down. And even as they have machine guns on planes, multiple planes going at a house with balloons that is very slow, they still, like the stormtroopers, can't deliver a fatal shot enough to bring down the house, or like the stormtroopers couldn't bring down the Millennium Falcon.
Alpha is the leader of the dogs, kind of like how Darth Vader is the figurative leader of the clone troopers / stormtroopers. And like Darth Vader, Alpha has a voice box so that he can communicate with others, and mainly his master. Also like Darth Vader, Alpha is like really black, has a deep voice, and is intimidating. So since Alpha is the implied Darth Vader, that would have to make Muntz the, what's his name? Emperor Palpatine. And he is actually a lot like Emperor Palpatine because the lightning can kind of be represented by his shotgun that he uses throughout the movie. And at first he seems like the good guy, kind of like in the prequels of the Star Wars, or the original, or not the original, but the rest of the story. Anyways, you get it. He's using the lightning, Emperor Palpatine, and Muntz has a shotgun, and he has a lot of other people beneath it. Also, really strong fact, when Ellie and Mr. Fredricksen were kids, Muntz was already pretty old. So now that Mr. Fredricksen is like super old, like maybe in his 80s, somewhere around there, Muntz is still alive, which is completely incredible, especially since he's been living out in the wilderness for such a long time. And that's why Muntz is a lot like Emperor Palpatine.
Okay, Muntz's blimp is like the Death Star in Star Wars. Both kind of round, and they're big and gray. Just the blimp does not fire a giant laser beam that destroys stuff. But the point being that the blimp like the Death Star, is the main bad guys' home of operations, where all their underlings are stormtroopers or dogs. It's where their base is. They keep all their weapons and all that fun stuff on the blimp, just like the Death Star in the movie. And the house is like the Millennium Falcon because, just like the Millennium Falcon, they're both crap. They shouldn't fly very well, but somehow, like, even when being attacked by the dogs or the TIE fighters, they survive. At the beginning of the movie, it goes through a lightning storm, just like the asteroid field in Star Wars Episode 5. And somehow, in both parts, they get bumped a bit and hit a little, but never enough to actually bring the vehicle itself down. They just keep going.
Finishing up with some of the lower side characters, Kevin and Doug kind of represent Chewbacca and C-3PO and R2-D2. One's tall and slender, one's kind of short and stout. And with Kevin, he's a lot more like Chewbacca than Doug because no one can really understand Kevin except for Han Solo, which is kind of taken on in this part as Russell. Now that we're at the end of the story, Ellie, just like Anakin, kind of comes back in the form of a book that Mr. Fredrickson opens up and reads, and thus brings Mr. Fredrickson back to life and basically gives him a new life. At the very end of Up and Star Wars A New Hope, they both end with a medal award ceremony, which just wraps it all together, ties them. They're perfectly bundled, representing each other so nicely. And that's how Up is like Star Wars.